Welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining. What I'd like to do is share with you a pre-recorded session that my co-presenter Dominic and I put together ahead of time. So essentially for the next 45 minutes, I'll be playing a video of that presentation. At the end of the video, we'll go back live and we'll be available for Q&A. So I'll start sharing here imminently. I really hope you guys get something out of this and learn something. Yeah, enjoy. Let's see if this works.
Hello, my name is Ryan Hickey, and I'm here today to talk to you about helping cities understand current and future parking needs with real-time stall-based monitoring. I'm joined today by a very intelligent and experienced creative parking consultant named Domenic Sorbara, and he'll tell you a little bit about himself later. A little teaser is that he's been in the industry a very long time, and he's very big on data and how data can help us make better decisions. For myself, I'm the co-founder and COO for a company named 11X. My company is about the Internet of Things, about collecting data from remote places, such as parking stalls, but also many other things like water meters and other water-related things, air quality, things like that. So what I'm bringing to the conversation today is my perspective on kind of the technology of collecting data from parking stalls, while Dominic is going to go very deep into the value of all the insights that we can garner from such rich data sets. So the agenda for today is understanding the parking problem, just to frame the rest of the conversation. Also different ways to collect the parking data, and then focus a little bit more into that real-time parking data and why that's a very powerful and rich data set. And then deriving valuable insights from the data. That again is when Dominic is going to go into all kinds of interesting metrics and information and abilities to basically learn from this data and make better decisions. And at the end, we'll have time for a Q&A. So everybody has seen some of these types of statistics before and metrics before. You know, parking is actually a huge problem in our society. It's not just a problem for municipalities to manage. You know, 30% of downtown traffic is just from what we call cruisers, people looking for spots, looking for places to park, maybe looking to short-term park at the curb or whatever. And then there's lots of economic value in parking, as we can see, as a result of the wasted time. People are driving around and the cost, fuel and everything else. This problem is only going to get worse. Population density is expected to increase over the coming years globally. And also our transportation is really changing. You know, there's all kinds of delivery network companies, transportation network companies, Uber, Lyft, the Amazon deliveries, all this stuff is really adding to congestion. And then there's also the safety issues, and what we didn't mention here, but it's also a big part of this problem is the GHG and the other environmental impacts. But on a day-to-day basis, you know, what does a city care about? What do parking managers care about? Really, we want there to be a really nice customer experience. You know, we want them, there's this dream of frictionless parking. Absolutely, that's what we want. That's an ideal. We aren't there today, maybe someday. And this lack of transparency into where there is available parking and also what the pricing might be can cause frustration. And then also there's a lot of pressure on cities, especially, you know, now that a lot of cities have seen a big drop in revenue, parking revenue due to COVID-19. You know, how do we improve those revenues? How do we get that profitability up? Because it's a major source of income for cities. And then how do we get a deeper understanding of the parking assets? I mean, there's all kinds of things that are involved with planning, everything from pricing maybe new construction of parkade or a surface lot or other changes. Maybe you have LRT coming or some other changes to your city, and as well as the changes we already talked about that are more macro changes. Now, Peter Drucker, for those of you that don't know, is a very famous management consultant. He coined a bunch of phrases. One of them is, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So that's really what we're talking about today, is how to get more visibility into what's going on with your parking by measuring what's going on with your parking. And there's a few attributes to a good measurement that I'd like us to keep in mind for the rest of our conversation here. That is accuracy, reliability, frequency, timeliness, and granularity. So those are all different attributes of a measurement. I'll touch upon each one as we go through some of the examples of measurements, ways to measure parking. So here's some different methods. Let's start with manual. I think everyone's familiar with this method. A lot of cities today will measure occupancy by doing a count of their parking assets and how they're being used on some periodic basis. Often that's annual, maybe it's less often, maybe it's more often. And it does have, some level of accuracy, some other, it's that, it is on that period of annual or whatever. But probably not the richest data set, probably not the best way to get that visibility that you need for some of your decision making. And then we have lots of other ways of collecting data. So oftentimes a city will have pay meters or pay stations. You can gather data that way, obviously, like how many people have paid, different times of day that people have paid, and it gives you some pretty good coverage. And then other ways to measure would be like for enforcement. When you do LPR, you're running around either with a phone app or you have a car with cameras on it, or however you do that. You're able to take a snapshot of the utilization. It may not be easy to get at that data, but it is being collected. And then you have things like loops and gates. These are notoriously, let's say, unreliable. We talked about one of the attributes of measurement is reliability. If anyone has a lot with a gate or loop, you have to go and do a count once in a while to figure out what that error is, that offset. The problem is once there's an error in the system, it just accumulates. So you need to reset that on a periodic basis. Video is another method. It's getting really good with video analytics improvements over the last recent years with AI and machine learning. Obviously, it's getting better and better. Some of the things that could impact accuracy are any kind of obstruction between the camera and the places that you're trying to measure. And then mobile apps, payment apps, they're pretty good. I mean, you can know you have GPS on your phone, and you that can be logged, and you have when someone paid and for how long and all that stuff. And it's great if someone has the app and they're using the app to pay for their parking, and they actually pay for the parking. It's actually not bad. But there's a reliability issue and an accuracy issue because a lot of times people don't pay. Or they're not using the app, maybe they're using a different form of payment. So if you look at all these different methods, they all have their pros and cons. They all have strengths and weaknesses. And if you want to know with complete, coverage with the highest accuracy, the highest level of frequency, reliability, and timeliness, so you know exactly when a car comes and when a car leaves, and not be dependent on if someone pays or doesn't pay, or when the car drives by with the LPR recognition. You really need sensors that are in the stall. That stall level of resolution, so that's going towards that granularity piece, is a must-have. if you really want to understand your parking. You're not relying on some of these other factors that could really impact your accuracy and your reliability. Okay, so we went through some methods of collecting data, and we mentioned that, you know, having stall-based resolution and granularity is super important. We touched a little bit on kind of the real-time component, the parts of the measurement that are timely and frequent. So I want to focus in a little bit more on that. That's a really key part of having super rich data, is having those attributes to the measurement. So, you know, there are quite a few technologies that are used today in order to gather that information. Let's say to take that measurement is really what I should say. And if you look across the top here, we have a few, I would say, real world practical constraints that are available in almost all of the parking scenarios. And that's related to, you know, stuff like weather, stuff like installation, like is it wireless and battery operated? Does it last a long time on battery? You know, is it applicable for all use cases or just niche use cases? Do you need that line of sight? What about other light conditions, like whether it's at night or, you know, other cloudy or other light conditions? And then the overall accuracy of the technology. So if we look at those criteria and we look at the different types of sensors, it gives you a little bit of an interesting chart here. And I won't go through every one in detail. I will highlight a couple. We often see, let's take the infrared or ultrasonic sensors that you'll often see in the indoor environment, such as parkades. You might have the ability to put a sensor on the roof, for example. And these technologies are able to shoot a beam down and measure that time of flight for the beam to come back. And it works pretty good in a controlled environment. On the curb, when you don't have that kind of controlled environment, maybe that's not the best technology for that use case, as an example. And then if you take something like a magnetometer that's pretty reliable in any situation, whether you're in a parkade or you're on street, wherever that parking sensor with magnetometer is deployed, you will be able to sense a change in magnetic field caused by a big hunk of metal, which is essentially what the trick is to these types of sensors. And then a couple other ones I'll mention. You might be wondering, why is camera so only have one check mark? Well, I think a camera is super accurate. The video technology today is amazing. Unfortunately, there's a lot of constraints. It really degrades when you have weather. You can't really, you know, deploy it wirelessly and battery operated. You can do solar panels, maybe. That's something that's certainly practical outdoors. And the cameras, you know, on the curbside is hard, because where are you going to deploy it? And when you put it up there, you know, there's lots of possible obstructions, whether it be weather, tree branches, other objects. So I just wanted to highlight kind of what we were thinking there. And you can look at the other ones and probably figure that out for yourself. And happy to talk more about this in Q&A if anyone has any questions. So these are some of the benefits of real-time stall-based monitoring. There's, you know, kind of some real obvious ones here that relate back to kind of the big macro, you know, problems like greater good, GHG reduction, things like that, all the way through to, you know, increasing your revenue and improving enforcement. And these are all true. And certainly we view that this ability to have this much data in the measurement, with the measurement qualities that we mentioned, brings a lot of value in all these areas. I'm just going to talk a little bit more about a couple other areas I didn't really mention yet. One is, you know, once you have that real-time and accurate, reliable occupancy data flowing, it's really great for integrating with other technologies. There's a car in this spot. Did that person pay? If not, send an enforcement officer. That's assuming, of course, the payment is also connected to the internet in real time. And then also any type of guidance or wayfinding, whether that be with a phone app to get you to an open spot, or in this situation, letting directing you through a parking lot or even on street, turn down this street because there's 5 spots available. All these really nice attributes can only be realized with the type of measurements that we're talking about, the type of data that we're talking about. And that real time part is really what can make this a reality. And the other thing I want to mention is we talked a lot about the real-time data, and that's super important. But for the rest of this presentation, we're mostly going to be talking about this historical data and how you can perform analytics on it. That's really what Domenic is going to talk to you about for the rest of the presentation. It's super compelling when you have this very finely grained measurement for every single parking event across every single parking spot, accumulated over some length of time. This is where the power really comes in. You can perform, occupancy, turnover, dwell time, and many, many more types of measurements to really, truly understand what's going on. And that leads to making more intelligent decisions on pricing, on infrastructure, on all kinds of other things. And again, that's what Dominic's going to talk to you about next.
Thank you, Ryan, and welcome everybody to our presentation. I'm Domenic Sorbara, and I've been connected to the parking industry for over 45 years. I've learned the value of the collection of accurate and timely data necessary to support decisions related to parking strategies. To that end, I have developed data analytic tools. These tools range from in-house designed spreadsheets, GIS front-ended spatial tools, forecast modeling, to the development of neural nets to assist in projecting parking demand and supply based on historical data. I want to start off with an overview of the architecture of the approach to parking management strategies. We have parking demand, or customer data, and parking supply's response to that demand, as shown by the use of the parking facilities. We bring the outputs of these two components together to form, to analyze, to explore market opportunities that match parking services to demand. We begin to see strengths of the existing parking service, its weaknesses, and highlight the market opportunities that exist or may develop in the near to long-term planning horizons. These opportunities are discussed with stakeholders. They're costed out. Their plausibility is measured and brought together in the formation of a policy development workbench upon which we can evaluate alternative parking service delivery models, which we will debate and discuss with decision makers and our customers. Parking demand analysis. Physical environment through to customer experience are the data building blocks of the demand analysis process. Flowing from this process is an understanding of why people are visiting the area of study, what motivates them to drive there, how often this trip occurs, how they make a decision to park in one facility over another. Weighing factors such as walking distance, price, availability, duration of stay. And a key component of this analysis of customer demand is a reflection on their experience and their interaction with the parking services that we offered. The outcome of the parking demand analysis process is an understanding of our customers. Understanding who we are serving, what their various service requirements might be, is essential in the delivery of customer service. Once the customer profile is understood, then we can more critically evaluate the performance of our products, parking space, in the marketplace. Let's talk about the parking supply and how it responds to that customer demand. The marketplace is the stage where customer interacts with the products, the parking space. We offer that product in different forms: a surface lot, a structure, on the street, underneath buildings, etc. And these products are not located in the same place. Rather, they're spread out over the marketplace. The products that are available to our customers are fixed assets. The study typically takes inventory of capacity, where those spaces are located, their type, their ownership, their hours of business, the time that the service is available to the customer, and their cost. The product is or should be coordinated and marketed services in a logical and consistent way. The product line requires strategic thinking as to setting its value or cost and its role that it should be playing within the overall scheme of things. The parking product needs to be monitored and performance needs to be measured. Well, how can we measure that? Traditionally, we employ a logical and consistent methodology that requires field observation of parking use. A set of data that reflects distinct vehicles, identified by license plates, for example, and recorded at a prescribed interval of time, be it 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or each hour, depending on the size of the area that you're covering. The methodology serves to essentially create a parking ticket. A time in, time out, the date of the service, and where the parking is located. The methodology evolved to the installation from the installation of buried loop sensors placed at entry and exit of an off-street parking facility, to real-time camera or sensors in ground that monitor the occupancy of parking space. The simple parking ticket model provides the basis for the computation of volume, customer mix, and occupancy of space. The current technology now enables real-time data collection and monitoring of how the parking supply is responding to its customers. But the technology did not and cannot stop there. Further customer interface with the technology required the conveyance of another piece of vital information. Tell the customer where the vacant spaces are located. Real-time technology can effectively tell the customer which aisle contains the parking space product that they're looking for. The parking system is now able to speak to the customer on a more regular and timely basis. It could be speaking to you in real time with dashboards and other graphical presentation of events. It can deliver its reports to you upon request, be it daily, weekly, or seasonal for that matter. The three primary metrics that we're going to look at is volume, customer mix or duration of stay, occupancy or accumulation of vehicles. Let's have a look. Let's look at the key metric, volume. Volume of vehicles attracted to an area or to a particular parking facility is simply the magnitude of customers who parked. However, the turnover metric provides a synthesis of volume, capacity, and duration of stay. In theory, the higher the turnover, the shorter the duration of stay. The effective turnover metric serves to provide some insight to how many spaces are actually active. For example, 100 vehicles attracted to a parking facility that has 100 spaces would yield a turnover of 1.0. However, more in-depth look at this might indicate that the peak number of parked vehicles over the course of the day was 25 spaces. And thus the 100 vehicles were served by 25 spaces, giving an effective turnover of 4.0. Well, this might be an indicator that perhaps we're oversupplied here. Both turnover calculations are impacted by not only volume, but duration of stay. And real-time data will provide some answers to the question, am I meeting my turnover target? And am I not meeting it because of a change in volume or the duration of stay over time? Real-time data triggers investigation as to why turnover has changed. It also provides an opportunity to examine changes to the sources of parking demand over time. What has changed in the area that would impact my volume to capacity metric? If you know the volume attracted by a particular land use or demand profile, then through real-time data collection, you'll begin to build up a library of reference points. Consider this. We describe to a neuroanalytic engine inputs such as land use profile for a particular area. And the system would look within or outside of our subject area for a proxy site that shares the same demand and land use characteristics. We want to then predict what this new marketplace might attract in terms of parking demand volume. This would be input to, say, a pro forma analysis if the question was related to adding more parking spaces, for example. So the real-time data allows you to look within your own operation for proxy sites, a critical input to planning. To be clear, what we are trying to do with real-time data is looking for patterns over the course of time. And we begin to ask the question, are we attracting vehicles at an optimum rate? Can we push more vehicles through the market if we do something different to the operation? And where should we be making that change? The use of real-time data gives us an understanding of walking distance, the impact of price, land use changes. So this is, in essence, an interplay of how our supply is responding to various characteristics of the customer. Real-time volume data analysis provides a living laboratory to explore what is currently happening in the study area and what might happen in the study area if underlying factors change. A parking strategy is not only focused on remedies that treat current problems or opportunities, but wraps that strategy to address future conditions and opportunities that can arise. A common analytic tool is to see the historical performance of parking system components. For example, the analysis of volume or revenue over time, as shown here, serves to highlight trends, seasonality, and noise in the data. Noise serves to see the anomalies in the data over time. Something like the impact of COVID-19 or special one-time events, a change in the parking charges or supply, or other operational changes that occur and may temporarily impact the curve. Standard TSN packages compute trends, measure seasonality, and indicate noise in the data with a view to forecast based on historical data. The real-time data workbench serves this analysis as it presents such trends in a very timely manner. It also allows us to see the shape of the curve over the entire parking system or individual parking facilities and components over time. Again, as shown in the two charts here, opportunities are presented to examine the growth or decline in volume attracted to an area of study, attracted to a set of parking facilities, or to individual sites. That trend and the factors that drive it serve to provide the parking strategy with some insight into how well or poorly the parking service is performing over time. Again, the notion of building a laboratory. Let's have another look into the use of real-time data specific to the turnover of space. The geographic framework within which the real-time data is housed serves to help us see the areas of high demand and those of low or underperformance. Turnover analysis now has the added insight of looking at historical and predictive trends, seasonality, and other anomalies that may have occurred over time. The real-time lens serves the parking strategy with historical levels of service by individual facilities to a broader geographic area. As an outcome of this scope of analysis, we can infuse the parking strategy with historical experience found in the data. Areas of lower than predicted turnover performance can serve to understand the underlying causes and unveil market opportunities to better serve our customers. Leaving volume and moving into space occupancy. This is the easiest to understand because it's simply the number of vehicles parked compared to the number of parking spaces. The metric has a site or facility unit of measure. Could be a lot, parking lot, or block face on street. We want this kind of granularity because it ties the number of cars parked to the demand characteristics attracted by the land uses in and around it. Occupancy of space can point to an indication of what is an acceptable walking distance for our customers with various durations of stay. Occupancy is the ultimate test of whether the capacity satisfies the demand. The metrics of occupancy measure typically peak occupancy, average occupancy, and a measure of intensity. That is the number of consecutive time periods a target occupancy was reached. We'll talk about intensity in a couple of minutes. Each metric of occupancy can be framed within time, be it a day, a month, a year. It could be morning, noon, afternoon, evening for that matter, and serves to exhibit and show us trends, seasonality, and any anomalies in the pattern of occupancy. Each metric of occupancy can be framed within a geography to see where that occupancy is occurring, to begin the process of understanding the underlying customer demand patterns. The occupancy metric is a key data input to parking supply target setting and to pro forma analyses. It serves to help focus on the number of spaces deficient or in excess of demand in the marketplace. Here we can slice occupancy by customer type, that is by duration of stay. Through real-time data collection, we can begin to measure trends, seasonality, and anomalies in their pattern. I want to know the demand for my parking space over the course of the day by my various customer types. I want to identify when they arrive and where they park. Can I optimize my service to better reach out to my various customer types, knowing that they have varying degrees of walking distance thresholds, varying tolerance to cost of parking, and varying level of preference with respect to the type of parking product that I can offer, be it on-street, off-street, a loading space, an unloading space, a pickup or a drop-off space. And in addition, real-time data collection gives us the capability of examining any change in that behavior over the course of time. To elaborate on that time dimension, I just wanted to illustrate occupancy as it occurs over the course of the day. Real-time data can be animated via map-based analytic tools as shown here to convey the real-time distribution of occupancy over the course of the day. This serves to highlight the dynamic nature of where my customers are parking, to help identify pinch points in the balance of supply and demand, and help provide empirical evidence to any change that I might be contemplating to parking charges or time restrictions and other operational characteristics of my parking system. The real-time occupancy data can remove itself from the spatial framework and into charts that illustrate the occupancy over the course of key segments of the day. Many municipalities have this temporal variation as part of their application of parking requirements. Typically, we report overall peak accumulation, and that gets reported as a key performance index. We know as parking specialists that the scope is much finer than the overall accumulation of vehicles over the downtown or neighborhood. We know all too well about walking distances and their effect on parking use. We know that parking accumulation needs to be scoped at the market level, that is, logical walking distances to and from parking space and primary destination. The traditional occupancy, showing the peak, for example, is important, but it should lead us to finer analysis of the pattern of occupancy and how that provides insight to our understanding of the balance of parking demand and supply. The accumulation curve in real time allows us to see trends over time and build positive business responses regarding supply and demand to match or reflect the rhythm of the study area. Say the accumulation curve exhibits a single 15-minute peak point during the day, when the occupancy, say, is over 90% of capacity. I may need to trigger a price change to move vehicles, or perhaps conclude that the demand is just not high enough to merit any physical change to the supply or its operation. The shape of the curve and its measure of intensity serves us to look further into optimizing existing operations. On the other hand, a plateau-shaped curve, one that shows a set of consecutive periods of sustained high occupancy of space, may lead us to consider infrastructure changes, help to identify traffic pain points, raises questions regarding my supply, my time restriction, my pricing model. Is my parking space not turning over quickly enough due to overstaying? So has it become an enforcement issue during those periods of high intense occupancy? Or has the pattern of a customer mix changed over the course of these periods of intensity? And I'm starting to attract a very different mix, and so I'm not responding to them. The third component of the parking supply response to demand is an analysis of the characteristics of our customers. We look at the interplay of turnover and duration of stay. We can add a spatial lens to find out where various customer types, 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, etc., are parked over the course of the day or week or a month. Knowing where your various customer types are currently and historically being serviced is important to help plan price, supply, and operational considerations in the parking strategy. As shown here, you should be able to click on customer duration of stay category on the left and see their spatial distribution on the right in real time. Or select a sub area on the map on the right and find out the profile of customers it currently is attracting on the left. I want to use real-time data to measure current performance of my facilities and compare that to expected performance targets. The upper chart shows duration of stay along the horizontal axis and turnover on the vertical axis. The data points can be all your facilities or filtered by type of facility, filtered by spatial area, by day of the week, etc. There are a wealth of possibilities presented by the warehouse of real-time data. The relationship of the turnover to duration of stay should, in theory, follow that red line. That would represent the optimized attraction of demand. The analyst makes use of this data to understand those facilities or blocks that perhaps are underperforming. Those areas would initiate a finer analysis of demand, supply, and customer behavior. The analysis may lead to an investigation of misuse of parking space, overstaying, therefore reducing the volume and the turnover. Or that in fact it may indicate that there is no demand in the area and we might need to repurpose the parking lot. The use of duration of stay data also allows us to test the impact on parking space use if we change the time restrictions. That's represented in the chart at the bottom. If volume of vehicles were held constant, but durations of stay would increase by, say, 15, 30, or 45 minutes, for example, the impact would be to saturate the existing parking supply. Because the supply is not turning over, people are staying longer. This type of what-if scenario building can be part of the workbench or laboratory that real-time data collection presents to us. Key Performance Index. This metric is one that indicates the overall efficiency of parking space use. The metric integrates the following parking activity statistics: average duration of stay, volume, capacity, average occupancy of space, turnover, and hours of operation. The KPI serves to indicate the current level of optimization of our parking facilities in terms of serving the demand. It also points to a process of investigating facilities or areas that are not performing as expected. That investigation might lead to changes in the operational characteristics of the facility in question, or provide some evidence that the facility should be repurposed entirely. Again, the goal of optimization of the current asset has become a keystone of a very responsible and sustainable strategic parking strategy. Thanks very much for this opportunity to speak to the value of real-time data collection in the development of a sustainable parking strategy.
Okay, we're back to real-time live now. So what I'd like to do is just finish off by saying thanks again, everybody, for joining. Kudos to Domenic. I mean, he's just sensational when it comes to understanding all this parking data. Really, every time I hear him speak, I learn a little bit new, something new. So what I'd like to do now is open up for the Q&A. And I just noticed in the chat here that there are some questions. So maybe we'll just start reading those off. So first one here is, have you seen any recent profound trends in parking demand, supply, and space occupancies during COVID-19? I have. So I can also let Domenic talk about it in a second, but from our experience, we've had a stall-based real-time parking project with the city of Stratford for a couple of years now. So we actually have a lot of data, and it was actually eerie to see the trend that happened on March 15th, whenever that was, when we shut down here in Ontario. You know, Stratford is a city, if you don't know, they have a lot of tourism. They have a Stratford Shakespeare Festival with lots of plays and stuff. It's a pretty touristy town. It's a beautiful town. So what you see is when the weather starts to improve, you'll see their Saturday parking just start to go up to over 85% capacity in their downtown core. And you could see, obviously this was March, so it wasn't at 85, but it was at 65, 70% easily. And you can see it was rising week over week. And then after the shutdown, Sunday was the slowest day. During the week, you might get up to 35% occupancy. On Sunday, you're down to 20. Is this, you know, you can just really see how that relates to the entire economic, I don't want to say health, but I guess it is health of the entire city when you just see that type of drop in demand. I see the next question here is for Domenic. Maybe you can take that one. Do you see it in the chat? I mean, you can share my screen. Domenic, are you able to see the?
Yep.
Okay.
Seems obvious that more data is better. However, do you see any changes in the parking study requirements or city planning initiatives that indicate a wider adoption of real-time parking monitoring solutions? Well, I would say that I'm finding that both the parking study requirement study and city planning initiatives have found themselves to having to be more agile, or in a word that we hear quite often with parking, adaptive. And we've moved from, I think, a one-time set in stone parking strategy to one that needs to be more responsive to needs that change over the course of time, be it the day or the week for that matter. The challenge, I think, is to stop seeing the infrastructure as a static single role physical asset, but one that's more flexible and responsive to our mobility needs in real time. So I think real-time data collection has provided that opportunity to become more responsive to what's actually happening on the in the field.
Okay. Thanks for that. Another question, how is enforcement applied with only sensors? Great question. Some cities, especially the smaller cities or larger towns, they may not actually have paid parking, or they have paid parking that's got a time limit, and maybe it's using older meters or some other method of payment. With the sensors, you can actually see when a car has overstayed. So if your limit is say 2 hours, you can not only see on each stall whether or not there's only time left of 2 hours left. You can see like certain areas of town, like which areas are having more cars coming up due in the next half an hour or whatever. We have alerts not we have alerts. There are ability to set up alerts to alert enforcement officers when a car has overstayed. And then when you have payment, payment machines are now more and more getting connected to the internet. You could cross-reference spots that have paid with spots that are occupied or unoccupied. So if you have an occupied spot that's not paid, or an occupied spot where the payment was only for an hour and they're there for an hour and a half or 2 hours, you can send an officer to that spot. Next question, you talked about optimal rates through the use of real-time data. Do you really think that rates could evolve according to real-time occupancy data mixed with historical data? Are there any concrete and successful examples in parking garages? Is this yield management? There's a lot of questions there. We only have, I see a couple minutes left. I think, Domenic, this is probably more geared towards you. Would you like to take this one?
Yeah, that's demands a far more detailed response than I'm about to give you. But the concept of dynamic pricing is interesting in terms of being able to process that information and deliver it to the consumer. I think we've got examples of that, the use of smartphones and what have you, even digital sign. Can the rates be derived from real-time occupancy? I think certainly. Occupancy plus, of course, customer mix. And historical data provides some insight as to what the impact of those rates will be, where your customer's price elasticity is. But that's a great question, Jerome, and maybe we'll get back to you after this presentation and discuss that in more detail.
Yeah, so we're running out of time, but we do have a booth, 11X, the name of my company, has a booth here at the CPA. So if you want to go there, you can download some information, but you also could fill out a form and we'll get back to you. If you have any more, like if you want to engage with Domenic or myself or anyone else from my team, we'd be happy to do that as a continuation of this. And I guess that's pretty much time up. So thanks very much for the great questions. And thanks, Domenic, for being part of this.
Pleasure.